Now to our interview with the guest of the day. I am joined by the Chairman of Human and Environmental Development Agenda, Hida Resource Center, who is also the co-chair of the Anti-Corruption Thematic Working Group of the Open Government Partnership in Nigeria, Suraj, on the dangerous clamor for military takeover. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Now, this is a major issue that concerns every Nigerian. And once again tonight, we will be looking at what this means, the possible implication, and what the security apparatus must do to ensure peace in the country. But before then, let's talk about election. The election is over and a winner has been declared. How will you describe the process?
Yeah, I would want to... okay, so let's start with the election so that I don't jump the gun with your argument. So let's start with the 2023 election. And as you would want to read from unbiased, very clear assessment of the situation as it was done by the editorial of the Washington Post, the 2023 election marks a huge departure from our previous experiences with elections in Nigeria. And there's no doubting the fact that the BVAS has come to rescue the pariah integrity, the pariah nature of the report and previous experiences of our election. And that has saved, the integrity of the process. And for whatever it is, no matter who is not satisfied with the outcome, there's no doubting the fact that 2023 election is a sharp departure from what we had in 1999, in 2003, 2007, 2011, and even 2015. What we consider as the low turnout of the 2023 election is sincerely actually the real exact number of voters who voted. What you have seen in 2003, 2011, 2015, those particular years had a bogus number of ghost voters where numbers are just manufactured. And for parties like Labour Party, for instance, have every reason to be grateful to BVAS and to INEC for the result that actually came out from the Southeast. Without the BVAS and the 2003 election, there's no way that Labour Party or any party for that instance would have actually recorded the number of votes that came out from the Southeast, where you have over 90% of votes going to a particular party. Party like Labour Party would have reasons to be very grateful to BVAS and also to the electoral body that is able to even win elections where governors of other parties were in control in the states. What you have, and that is why you can check. It's very simple. Go to the local government elections that are conducted in the states and look at how the trend of victory will usually go in favor of the ruling party. And that would have been repeated with that at the general election, both presidential and governorship election. But the game changer remains that BVAS that made it extremely impossible for anybody to manipulate the outcome and the process of the election. If you succeed in any way of tampering with that process, you're certainly going to lose, that victory when it goes to the appeal process. And that is what is very critical for people to understand and to know.
All right, so if you're to rate the performance of INEC, did INEC promise too much but delivered little? Or do you share the view that with others who say this is one of the most credible elections in the history of Nigeria?
This is one of the most credible elections. INEC, like any interested and possibly a genuine body, would want to make as much promises as it was possible, which included that of the IRF. There's no law that made IRF compulsory or important or critical to the process of the election. IRF, as it was promised by INEC, was just to increase the transparency of the process. It is not to actually determine or influence the outcome of the process. The unfortunate situation is what can be experienced with any technical issues and situation, like we just had with the IRF. And that is not enough in any way, like I said, to either undermine the outcome of the electoral process, because what was meant to go on the IRF portal are election results declared in polling units where all the political parties have their agents. So if you have the agents, you already have a copy of that result. What IRF was meant to do is just to aggregate all of them and put them in also just one spot for anybody to do. So for those who could not see it, especially the political parties, and I've reiterated that, especially for the political parties, that you don't actually need to wait for the portal on the IRF for you to determine the outcome of the vote in all the polling units where you participate. Everybody have a copy of that from the polling unit or otherwise. So the only thing that is possible to do with the outcome of the IRF is the possibility for you to now controvert whatever it is that is there on the IRF and check it with the ones that you have with yourself.
All right. Obviously, the opposition parties do not agree with you because most of them have described the presidential election as the worst in Nigerian history.
No, I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, which is where you have too many sore losers in Nigerian politics, because the politicians in Nigeria would just want to make politics an election a do or die affair. So it is either I win or nothing. And majority of them are very insincere to themselves and many of their followers. There's no parameter, there's no check, there's no qualification that can make the 2023 election lesser in terms of performance and integrity, lesser than any previous election. I'm saying not in total. I'm not saying in total. In total is a different thing. I'm saying every single parameter that would be used to assess the 2023 election to all the previous elections, the 2023 election stands far higher, towers far higher, over and above all the other previous elections.
Now, fast forward to this time that we are. INEC has declared Tinubu as the president-elect. But why are we still having so much heat in the polity?
I mean, I made that point a little earlier in my last comment. The Nigerian politicians are not just in any way exhibiting what is expected of this kind of context, the sportsmanship that is expected of them to understand the fact that, you know, in elections you have to win and you have to lose. People who don't even have the basis to lay claims to victory are looking for every excuse. And if you look at some of them, and the situation has been extremely ridiculous to the extent that there was the argument of saying, oh no, if you don't win in Abuja as the FCT, then there's no way, or if you don't get 25% or even win in Abuja, then you can't be considered to have won the election. In spite of the decision of the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, to the extent that nothing of that nature exists in the electoral law or even in the Constitution, and Abuja, like every other state, is equal and the same with any state. But those who want to just find a justification and excuse to contest the outcome of the election, in their own interpretation, started that campaign that has never ever happened before in the history of the country. And the other ones initially started with the use of the IRF, where they made failed attempts at elevating the IRF to the status of a law, to the extent that the failure or the inability to upload the result on IRF would vitiate the election or the outcome of it. And now I think a number of them have seen, you know, the futility of pushing for that kind of argument, and they have backed out from it. And I mean, you would give it to some of the previous contestants in the election. I mean, Buhari lost election 3 times. in this country. And there was never a time that there was any call for military takeover of government. And there was never a time, yes, there was a protest, there were rallies, and the rest of that. But there's never been a time that we've had a similar situation, especially in a situation where you're seeing candidates who came third in the election, insisting that they actually won. And there's no fact, no evidence to the extent of the claimed victory. And it is extremely unfortunate that quite a number of them who don't understand what it takes to have, military disengage from government. So even though some of us were students in the university when we started the campaign for the military disengagement, there's no person who has been part of the campaign for civil rule in Nigeria and the disengagement of military from our polity that would ever wish or call for a military takeover of government, especially when there's no justification in this case. So there's been election, there's been the declaration by INEC, and those calling for the cancellation of the election have not really shown any, evidence to support that kind of claim. I mean, the claims that are just made are still within the ambit of what can be presented to the tribunal or to the court for adjudication. I think it is just unpatriotic for a number of them who are very new into governance, who had no history in terms of, campaign for democratization and democracy in Nigeria, to be wishing for a military takeover of governance.
All right, Mr. Suraj, now talking about the outcome of the election, the PDP presidential candidates, Atiku Abubakar, and that of Labour Party, Peter Obi, have challenged this outcome in court. And there are also threats of street protests. But is this really desirable?
No, I mean, it is desirable for them to actually challenge the outcome of the election in court. I mean, this is going to help our jurisdiction to identify those who are accused of infractions or manipulation of the electoral process for appropriate prosecution by the law enforcement agencies. But the politicians are not usually after that. They are just after victory for their candidates or also for their parties. But in terms of street protest, it is the fundamental right, the freedom of expression, association, and the rest of that. But you go out of band and it becomes a treasonable offense when you want to subvert the democracy or the civil rule in the country, where you call for military intervention. That is no more.
All right, so do you also believe that the opposition is bent on truncating the process?
It just tends to criminal offense for which such advocates can be prosecuted.
All right, so do you also believe that the opposition is bent on truncating the process?
Yeah, I mean, there's that belief. It depends on the utterances of the opposition, and I feel very bad and very sad when I read and I saw tweets and I listened to some of the utterances, particularly that of the vice presidential candidate of the Labour Party, who went ahead begging, and I can't imagine where that sense of of entitlement, of how I can say childishness, would come from a former senator who would call on the president and the chief justice of the country not to hand over in an election. I mean, when there's the opportunity for the tribunal and the court to actually subvert whatever it is by that the electoral body might have wrongly, done, I feel this is really also very unbecoming of our politicians, and some of them really need to be cautioned and also reined in from going ahead with this level of display of childishness and of patriotic engagement of the politics.